Hi there, and welcome into another video for the International Wine and Food Society here in Birmingham, Alabama. Coming to you on an absolutely gorgeous Friday around lunchtime, and we are in a new spot here in Birmingham. We are excited to be broadcasting today from the newest location of Red or White, a wine bar and just phenomenal retail food component from South Alabama that has now made their way up to the Birmingham market here in the Forest Park neighborhood. So we are incredibly excited and fortunate to be here. We are currently filming from what is not quite finished up yet, but is going to be the wine bar side. An absolutely beautiful space. Can't wait to actually come in here and enjoy a couple of glasses and some
tapas.
Of the tapas, yeah, some of the food, some of the wood-fired pizzas that are going to be coming out. So very excited and very much anticipation. So today we've got a pretty fun topic as we're coming into the holidays, and I think one of the hidden gems I'm going to call it the Burgundy region because I feel like I'm justified in saying that.
And we'll talk about that later in detail.
Yeah,
go ahead.
So some really fun stuff. We're going to be talking today about a little spot called Beaujolais. And what's really fun about these wines is it's at the very southern tip of the Burgundy region. It's not technically part of the Côte d'Or, where we see the Côte de Beaune and Côte Nuit. But we do have Chardonnay that's grown here, and we also have Gamay for the reds. Now, typically for Thanksgiving and holiday season, a lot of people go out and purchase what's called Beaujolais Nouveau. It's a very big holiday. It's kind of bringing in, celebrating the harvest and this beautiful young wine, Gamay. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there's also a pretty significant step up when it comes to Gamay and when it comes to Beaujolais. And that's more what we're going to talk about today. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is going to be Beaujolais Blanc. And today we are pouring the Laurent Perrichon. So again, this is 100% Chardonnay. And I'm going to turn it over to Drew Sarton for a minute to give us a little bit more information about what makes Beaujolais a little bit different and maybe a little bit set apart from Burgundy or from the rest of the Côte d'Or.
So just to kind of expand on what he said and also give a little bit of a history lesson while he's pouring these. So Beaujolais is kind of north of the Northern Rhone and south of Burgundy. Administratively, it is part of Burgundy, but if you were to ask anybody from Beaujolais, are you from Burgundy, they would say no. And if you were to ask anybody from Burgundy, is Beaujolais part of Burgundy, they would say, oh, for sure no. But in a wine sense, it is a separate entity. It's quite a large region. If you combine the Côte d'Or, the Maconnais, Chablis, and I think Champagne in size of volume and territory, it dwarfs all those combined. So it's a very large region, and to his point, within that region, about 1/3 of production is designated for Beaujolais Nouveau. Now, Beaujolais Nouveau has been around for a long time. Basically, what it is it's a younger version. It's the fresh juice. Normal maceration time for Beaujolais Nouveau is like 4 days. The longest it can be is 10 days. So it's very much the first pressing of the Gamay grapes. And really, while it's been done in this way for a while, it's really during the 1980s that George Duboff really made a marketing campaign around it and was able to make it what we call the Nouveau craze. Now, that has kind of subsided from its heyday, and while we still see Beaujolais Nouveau, what's really exciting, and to his point of what we're seeing and what Somms are really getting excited about, are these cru Beaujolais and village level Beaujolais that are not the Nouveau style of light, fizzy, and really needs to be consumed before the end of the year. They always come out on November 19th. What we're seeing is Beaujolais Nouveau that's more reminiscent of Burgundy in style, light in tannin, great acidity, ageable, and a little bit more specificity of place in the AOC. So we have some village levels that we'll talk about in a second here. But mainly when you think of Beaujolais, think Gamay grape, which is the main grape of Beaujolais. And then if you're thinking about white, think Chardonnay, maybe Aligoté, but know this. In that huge area of Beaujolais, only 1% of acreage is designated for white wines. Everything else is red. So while we're having a Beaujolais Nouveau, it's kind of a unicorn. It's kind of fun to find because you don't see a whole lot of them. This is the only one that I know of. There's maybe
Beaujolais Blanc.
Beaujolais Blanc. There's only one or two in the market. So they're delicious, they're unique, but they're also very, very rare, and especially even more so to see them in the U.S. because most of them are consumed domestically.
So the thing that to me I think is important to note too when we talk about the differences between Beaujolais and the rest of Burgundy and even the Maconnais is that it is further south. So what that's going to do is we are starting to get into some of those warmer climates like we see in the Rhone.
Like in the Rhone, yeah.
And you know, the soil, we don't have quite the like difference from like row to row, vine to vine, almost like you do see in Burgundy. It's a little bit more of kind of that like clay and volcanic kind of stuff going on.
There's some decomposed schist as well in certain areas. But to your point, you're right. It's more of region by region soil differences than say in the Côte d'Or where you have row by row or vineyard by vineyard differences. That's not true everywhere, but for the most part of Beaujolais, you're going to see a little bit less of that difference so close.
So let's talk a little bit about stylistically what we see with the Beaujolais Blanc. So one thing that I think stands out is that we don't see quite the lavish oak treatment like you would see on some of the, the Montrachets of the world or something like that. This is definitely primarily stainless or very neutral oak.
Very much so.
And because of that warmer climate, I feel like we've got, by default, the grapes are going to be a little riper, a little bit almost more of a juicy character.
Yeah.
And I feel like with this, we're getting this beautiful, bright, citrusy lemon zest component.
Tangerine all day long.
Yeah, and to me, what's so exciting, again, a lot of people think of, Beaujolais Nouveau for Thanksgiving meal, and we'll kind of get into that with the reds and some of those components of why Beaujolais and, things like turkey make a lot of sense. But right now, with just that tangerine and citrus component, like all I can think about is how amazing and incredible this would be with some roast turkey where, a lot of times people may do something like citrus zest either in a brine or in like a maitre d' butter, while roasting a turkey or something like that. Certainly with kind of the brightness of those green fall vegetables, things like Brussels and kale and asparagus and stuff like that. This wine would just be an absolute just ringer to open up. And the other good thing about Beaujolais is, by and large, for world-class wine, they're incredibly affordable.
Oh, especially the Beaujolais Blanc. We're talking about the mid-teens as a retail here. And I totally agree with you. And it's still Chardonnay, so there's some richness there as well. So it is going to stand up to those heavier meats. This would be fine with, I think, some seafood or whatever in a non-traditional or in a non-Thanksgiving meal. But it's still got the roundness of mouth. There's acidity, but it's not attacking your sides here like a Sauvignon Blanc or Grigio would. But there's lift to this wine, and it's kind of exciting.
I think it's you mentioning Sauvignon Blanc. It really is, to me, almost a fantastic happy medium for that Chardonnay lover and that Sauvignon Blanc lover.
I agree.
It's a great in between that kind of hits the high points of both. And again, there's just not a lot of it. So the fun thing is when you find Beaujolais Blanc, if you're going to a party or something like that, chances are you're bringing a bottle that no one else has ever had.
And yet they've had Chardonnay, right? So you're still comfortable in the fact that it's not some weird esoteric grape that you've never heard of from Turkey. But it's really good to introduce people to a new region. We're going to talk about the reds now and give you a little bit of history. Obviously, Beaujolais, and very much so the same tradition of most wine-growing regions in France, started with the Romans and the conquering of Gaul. We also have, a lot of monastic properties there, not as much or as still existing as in Burgundy, but that kind of was continued on through the Charlemagne area. And while, the crus are now kind of coming into their own, they've always been there to a certain degree. AOCs are continuing to be developed. The little village of Regnier was the most recent one that was done in like 1988, I'd say. But when we're talking about Cru Beaujolais, again, we're separating that off from Beaujolais Nouveau. But there's going to be a similarity in the way they're made, and we'll talk about the crus in just one second. But Beaujolais in and of itself is made in a very unique way for the most part. We go through a process called semi-carbonic maceration. So what happens is they use these grapes whole cluster, they put them in the vat. The bottom third of that vat is getting crushed naturally by the weight of the grapes on top of it. So what happens is the fermentation process is starting on that bottom third, and one of the byproducts of fermentation is carbon dioxide. So as that carbon dioxide is being released, and don't forget, in this whole process, it's an oxygen-free area, that carbon dioxide is actually satiating into the grapes of the ones above it. So what happens is that carbon dioxide goes in, They also use a chemical powder to initiate fermentation within the grape. And so what happens then is that grape explodes, fermenting because of the fermentation process. And so you get a lighter, lower tannin, high acidity, and a little bit of spritz to your grape when you're first making Beaujolais. Now, when you're making Beaujolais Crus, those are going to sit on those grapes for a longer period of time. You get increased tannin, you get increased structure, color, flavors, all that kind of thing.
And those bubbles, the CO2 as it were, kind of
dissipates out. Now, when we make Beaujolais Nouveau, those bubbles are still there, which is why Beaujolais Nouveau is so spritzy, fun, quaffable drink. The Beaujolais Crus and even some of the lower Beaujolais Village level stuff are going to be more reminiscent of that Burgundy style. They're going to be a little bit more structured. They're not going to be fizzy at all, but they're going to have still that nice lift of acidity to it. So even though they are in a warmer area, we consider Beaujolais and Gamay from this area to be a lighter skinned, lighter kind of flavored wine. Some of the villages that you've probably heard of, and one grape that we're going to talk about here is this very new to Birmingham called from Domaine Chasselet. This one's called Beaujolais is Not Dead, which is kind of a fun label. It's a fun wine, and it kind of represents a good kind of village level, normal style to Beaujolais. The one thing I would say that's unique about this one is that it is completely biodynamic, so very much in the pro-organic realm. But these are going to be light, they're going to be easy drinking, they're going to kind of remind you of Burgundy level wines with a little bit more lightness to them, more feminine character as well. Depending on where you get your Beaujolais on the cru Beaujolais level though, and we've opened up this one here from Chateau Tivine. This is from a village called the Côte de Brouilly. Côte de Brouillys are typically a little bit darker in style, they're a little bit more gamier, and they're a little bit more tannic driven. Whereas something like Fleury or Morgan or Moulin Avant would always have a little bit more of a lighter, more kind of feminine, silky kind of characteristic to it. So even within, just like within Burgundy, even within Beaujolais, you can find variations within the grape of Gamay. Kind of depends on where you're doing it.
Right, and I think that's the fun thing about the producers within these crew highlighting the beauty and the characteristics of the crew, giving them more of a sense of place. Now, the one thing that is important to note is that in Beaujolais, there are no Premier Crus, there are no Grand Crus. But do not let that be a deterrent, because some of these Cru Beaujolais, especially stuff like Côte Brouilly, can certainly age for several years.
Yeah, up to like 15 years, I think, in some cases. So.
And the reason that I think, too, like the Cru ones get so fun for the holidays, we think about roasted meat, those kind of savory herbs, the sage, the rosemary, marjoram, stuff like that, and these wines have that kind of herbal characteristic to them, but yet they're still light enough where you can kind of drink them all day. I'm not saying you should, but you can if you want.
But also they can go with some fish dishes as well, especially on the heavier side. Like this Côte de Brouilly is still light in character to be able to stand up to like an amberjack or a swordfish or something like that, maybe even salmon. Lighter, flakier fish, yeah, I probably would do something else, or maybe pick a Beaujolais that's a little bit lighter in style, like what we talked about earlier, or a Fleury or a Moulin Avant. But that's the kind of fun thing about a Beaujolais and Gamay is it's a very versatile grape, but it's more versatile by where it comes from more so than the style of the winemaker.
Right. Well, we hope you guys have enjoyed this little quick video on Beaujolais. We hope that you certainly go out and find some that you get excited about and that you can enjoy not only at the holidays, but for days, weeks, months, and years to come after that.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.